Out with the old, in with the new. Both a new year coming up and, of course, a new season of anime. Winter 2023, which seems to be a little less, hectic and heavy than the seasons recently have been, so that's a little bit nice, not anything super crazy and hyped up coming out Chainsaw Man or Spy Family or any other of the really, really crazily hyped shows from this past year. But nevertheless, there are still a number of shows to talk about. Some sequels, some new ones, some originals that don't have any source material, and we will be talking about the 10 or so that sound interesting to me. And inevitably, I'll probably miss one or two that end up being very good, because I seem to always miss one or two that end up being very good. But that is how it is. Let's start off with Vinland Saga Season 2. Now, bit of a hot take. Put down your pitchforks for a second and hear me out. I wasn't the biggest fan of Vinland Saga. I know, blasphemy. And I'm not really happy that I have that opinion, because I went into Vinland Saga 3 years ago after that show had gotten a significant amount of hype, primarily from how well respected and beloved the manga was. And the manga has been going since 2005 or something. So it had quite the reputation before the anime came out. But I went into it really, really expecting to love it. I thought it was going to be one of the best anime of that year for me. And maybe that hype and those expectations that I had could have played a factor in me not enjoying it as much as I thought. I'm not sure, but my main issues with Vinland Saga Season 1 primarily were that Thorfinn was just kind of a terrible character. And that doesn't seem to be too controversial, but generally for a lot of people, they felt like the other characters made up for it. And I really didn't. Yes, there's Askeladd, and in the last couple episodes, he gets a lot to, focus on, and there's a lot in terms of his backstory. But for me, at least, it was kind of too little too late. And I just felt like there wasn't enough in terms of the characters or the plot progression to really carry me through as much as I thought there would be. Now, this is a long source material. I believe there are time skips eventually, and maybe even in this season. I haven't really looked into the specifics of what this season is going to cover. But eventually, of course, they have to get to Vinland. I don't know if that's going to happen now or later, but I am somewhat hopeful that as the status quo changes up, which inevitably it has to with how Season 1 ended, that maybe we'll get to a point where, hey, I am enjoying it. Maybe as Thorfinn becomes a better character, hopefully. But I don't know. I'm concerned because I wasn't that big on Season 1, despite wanting to be. And, maybe because my expectations will be lowered because of how I felt about Season 1. I might like Season 2 more. We'll see. I'm still going to watch it because, I don't hate Vinland Saga. I just felt disappointed with it. And I don't know. Hopefully things will be better. Unfortunately, this is not the only sequel that I'm not, the most excited for. Bungo Stray Dogs Season 4 is another one, and I just cannot believe this has gotten 4 seasons. And again, this isn't a show that I dislike. It's just kind of whatever. I've never felt very strongly about this, despite the fact that, I know some people do. It's weird. Bungo Stray Dogs, it's not a show you see talked about that much, at least not now. I remember when Season 2 came out at the end of 2016, that got, not a crazy amount of discussion, because there were a lot of other shows in 2016 that I think just eclipsed it. But I remember the second season did get more praise than the first season did, because nobody talked about the first season when it came out. But the second season got a lot more praise. I remember its score on Mal was super high, which is what made me ultimately decide to watch the show, because after Season 1 I was I don't need to. But Season 2 had so much more being talked about concerning it, and its score was so much higher. It was in the high 8.4s, where this first season was 7.7 or something at the time. And granted, these scores have changed over time, but it felt there's more to this than just like the seasonal effect where a second season's going to have a higher score if it's of the same quality as the first season. So I expected more out of it when I watched it. And ultimately, I just felt like, no, these seasons are kind of the same in quality. They're both kind of whatever. So I was kind of disappointed in that because it was just sort of the seasonal effect at the end of the day. And then season 3 was just kind of more of the same when that came out in, 2019. So I don't know, like, I've just never felt that attached to the world or the characters. And again, it's not bad. It's not like I can point to any one thing and say, here, this is the problem. It's just so whatever. For me, at least. Now, I'll watch the 4th season. I've already seen 3. Might as well see 4 and keep my opinion updated in case things change, which is, something people are going to say is very stupid to do, but unfortunately, that's how I feel like I need to do things. But I don't know. I don't really expect much. If you really like this show, great. I'm glad that there are people that can clearly, like, for this to get 4 seasons, there are people who care about this. Maybe it's more of like, an underground fan base, I guess, at this point. Because again, outside of like somewhat when season 2 was airing, I feel like this hasn't really been a show that's gotten talked about a lot, at least not like here in the West. But hopefully those who like it continue to like it. And hey, maybe it'll do something for me, but I'm not really expecting much. A sequel I am somewhat more excited for is Bofuri Season 2, or I Don't Want to Get Hurt So I'll Max Out My Defense. This was a show that I only watched about a year ago, even though it came out almost 3 years ago at this point. But it was something that I didn't really expect a lot out of. Like, oh, it's another video game show. But at least here, like, it's not isekai per se. Like, they're not being forced into a video game. They're not going to a fantasy world with video game elements. It's not set in a fantasy world. It's literally like a group of characters playing a video game and just having fun playing the video game. Like, it's very low stakes. Like, the stakes are just, oh, we have to do well in this event in the game, and that's it. And I think, honestly, as simple as that sounds, it's very refreshing because of that, because it is such a low stakes kind of comfy series where it's just these fairly likable characters just having fun, right? I thought Maple was a nice character. I thought her friend was another nice character. Some of the cast, like, because there is a big cast because they needed like a certain number of characters to fill out their party. Like, some of them really didn't get that much focus, like the 2 sisters, like the red-haired girl, I don't even remember their names. Like, they were not very well focused on, and some of them just kind of like show up. I would hope that they get more focus in this new season, but even if they don't, like, they don't hurt the show. They just don't add anything to it. Regardless, like, I liked this. I liked it more than I would have thought. And even though it's not like an amazing show, it's not like it's going to blow you away. It's just very comfortable. It's like comfort food or junk food. It's nice. It's nice to have. It's not amazing. It may not even be good for you or healthy, but like, it's nice. And if it's just more like season 1, I'll be fine with that, And one other thing I want to mention, I really appreciate that despite the fact that Maple is very much so like the overpowered protagonist, I like that it's different because she is doing it through defense rather than offense. And also, like, despite how OP she is, she still feels like a real, like, fleshed out person to, a degree that would be expected for a show like this. So I am looking forward to this probably more than anything else in this season. So I think it's a nice show if you haven't checked it out. And the last, like, actual sequel we're going to be talking about is Tokyo Revengers Season 2. Now, I liked Tokyo Revengers Season 1. I know there's like some controversy around it. I feel like people either hate Tokyo Revengers or love it. I was just kind of in the middle. Like, I thought it was good. I liked it, but I didn't like think it was amazing. But I am actually happy to see more of it, especially with how Season 1 ended. Like, if that was how the show ended, you could never like recommend it to someone. It was not a satisfying conclusion. But if there's more, then it's fine. Now, there are some oddities with this series, like obviously, and I'm reiterating points other people have made. These characters are supposed to be in middle school. They do not look like middle schoolers. They look like, 20, 30-year-olds. They look like adults. They're doing literal, like, gang war stuff. People are getting stabbed and killed and hurt. And, like, this is not stuff that, like, 13-year-olds would be doing, at least not to this extent. So it's just, they don't act or look like or do things that middle schoolers would do. And it raises the question of, why are they middle schoolers? Like, why not just have them be adults, or at the very least, like, be in college or maybe high school. There are also just like some weird aspects of convenience to this show where like certain things just kind of get glossed over or work themselves out in ways that you wouldn't expect if this was like actually happening. Not to the point where like everything just works out perfectly. Like obviously there are challenges for the main character to overcome and everything, but like certain things that you think would create drama or need to be focused on just kind of don't. And it's like, it's weird, but I guess it's also like, hey, the show knows what it wants to do and isn't really wasting time on this stuff. I don't know. It's awkward. It's just kind of awkward. And if you've seen the show, you know what I mean. I'm trying not to, talk about it in too much detail here if you haven't seen it, but it's just kind of weird in certain spots. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it might bug you to some degree. So regardless, I'm looking forward to this. The problem, or at least I think we can call it a problem. Disney Plus grabbed the rights to this. They did not have the rights to season 1, of course. Now, Disney Plus has recently been grabbing some shows, like they had Summertime Rendering, and it made it very difficult to watch that show. And like the way they've been releasing the dub is weird as well. Now, at least in that case, that was like a brand new show. Tokyo Revengers had a season already, and it got dubbed. I would expect that if they dub this season, it'll probably have like a brand new cast, which is frustrating. And even if you don't watch it dubbed, it's going to be hard to watch it anyway, or at least harder to watch it because we don't know when Disney Plus would actually be releasing it or in what way. And it's just, it's strange. It's weird. It reminds me a lot of when Netflix was like licensing the sequels to shows that they didn't have the rights to season 1 for, and then they give it completely new dub cast. Like they did this with Takagi, they did this with The Disastrous Life of Psyche K, though they only dubbed some of the stuff they got, which is weird. I don't really like this. I think it's frustrating. None of that like reflects on the quality of the show, of course. It's just something to keep in mind when you try to watch this. That's it for like the actual sequels, but I guess I should probably mention a relevant commodity here in Trigun Stampede. Now, I've already talked about this in a dedicated video when it was first announced a few months ago. You can watch that if you want my full thoughts on the matter, but I am not really looking forward to this. I'm putting it here because I think it's relevant and because if this ends up being well received in terms of its story, I will check it out. So I'm keeping my eye on it, but I am not a fan of Studio Orange. I'm not a fan of their CG anime. I don't like how this looks based on the PVs I've seen, so I'm not really happy with how it's being handled. I know there are people who love Studio Orange, love their animation, love their shows. That's great. It's just not something I'm eager to watch unless people are saying, no, the story is really that good. Especially because this is not in continuity with the original Trigun. This is kind of a weird thing where it's a new Trigun anime, but you would think it would be an adaptation of the manga in that case, but it's not. It's an anime original Trigun reboot that's separate from the existing anime and separate from the manga. And while that potentially allows for some interesting scenarios, I don't know, like there's not as much of a requirement that I watch it. Whereas if this was in continuity with the original Trigun, I would be like, yeah, gotta watch it. So I don't want to talk too much more about it. If you want more thoughts on this, you can watch my video from a few months ago, but I'll wait and see what the reception of it is before considering watching it. Moving on to the new shows from this season, we have Tomo-chan is a Girl. And as the title would suggest, Tomo-chan really wants you to understand that she's a girl. This basically seems like it's going to be a slice-of-life comedy series with some elements of romance, though it will remain to be seen how far the romance actually goes. Based on the premise, Tomo is very, very tomboyish and dude bro-ish and is best buddies with a guy who she is in love with. but this guy didn't even know that she was a girl for a very long time. So I imagine most of the comedy for this series will be Tomo trying to present her feminine side and make herself seem like a love interest for her friend who just sees her as one of the guys. And I think that could be entertaining as long as it does not kind of devolve into a gimmick. Like, it's an interesting enough hook if they have progression and there actually is some growth in their dynamic, and if it doesn't get stale. If it does get stale, then this might be entertaining for a few episodes and then just kind of get boring. Hopefully that won't happen, but interesting enough on its own. And I have seen this advertised a lot leading up to this season, so hopefully there's something to it based on that. Next up we have Kubo Won't Let Me Be Invisible. And this seems like it could be another, like, comfy, kind of charming, low-stakes series. So basically, the main character is someone who is very much so ignored by the rest of his classmates and who literally is invisible to most of them and doesn't really seem to mind it. It gets to the point where if someone does see him, it's taken to be like a super rare event. It is lucky if you see this guy. And the one person who seems to be able to see him regularly is the titular Kubo, who will not leave him alone. Now, their dynamic seems to be kind of like a fun, charming one. There is implied to be some degree of teasing. It doesn't seem like it's going to be like borderline bullying teasing, a la something like Takagi-san, which I really didn't like. At least I hope it won't go in that direction, because if it did, that would probably sour my opinion on this. I hope this stays as like a cute, fun dynamic between these two characters. And I hope, again, like, it doesn't get old with its hook. I hope that it's able to keep things fresh throughout, but hey, something to keep an eye on as just sort of a low-stakes show to throw on. Similarly, we have The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten, and this is somewhat giving me similar vibes to My Dress Up Darling. I don't know if that's entirely warranted, but the scenario here is that the main character basically gives the angel of his school, the super popular girl who everyone adores, his umbrella during a rainstorm, and he ends up subsequently getting sick, and she obviously wants to return the umbrella and try to make up for it. So when she ends up inevitably going over to his apartment to try and help him while he's sick, she sees just how much of a mess his apartment is and basically makes it her mission to help him out. And it helps that they are indeed neighbors, so it's not like she's going out of her way too much to do it, but obviously this friendship will eventually evolve into romance at some point, whether that'll happen in this season or never if it doesn't get more seasons, or in a future season, I don't know. But the reason why it gives me similar vibes to Dress Up Darling is just because you have these two characters that seem to be from different social groups, from different worlds, and they're brought together through unassuming means, and a relationship of some sort inevitably follows. And I could see it being cute and charming, and hopefully not too, like, repetitive, a la some of the other shows we've just talked about. I'll also mention the Fire Hunter, which up until literally today, we did not have a very good PV of, and I was basically just going to be going off of the description, but this seems like it could be a somewhat interesting action show based in like a post-apocalyptic world where you had this disease that kind of ravaged the population, caused a lot of people to spit out fire who had to kind of be hunted down and dealt with, and there's these weird black beasts running around causing trouble, and it seems like something that, if it doesn't get too messy or complicated, could be a solid action drama. But because it's based on a novel and I don't really know anything about the novels, I can't really say like how good the source material is. And I also, again, I am a little worried just because of how many moving parts appear to be here as to like how smooth the story will end up being. But nevertheless, it seems interesting. The animation seems good. So I'm keeping my eye on it at the very least. And the final show I want to talk about is one that reminds me a lot of The Ancient Magus' Bride. This show is The Tale of Outcasts, which seems to have a similar formula at first, where you have this sort of abandoned orphan girl who's struggling. Granted, her personality doesn't really seem to be like Chise's from Ancient Magus' Bride, but she's in like a similar enough position, and she ends up through happenstance meeting this person who kind of feels similar to Elias, though maybe not as emotionally detached, like this inhuman character who ends up taking care of her. And they kind of go through the British Empire, which is, it's not like a modern day, it's in the 19th century, but still they go around and they encounter other people and magical creatures and just kind of learn more stuff about the world. And it seems, based on the PV, to be something that could feel very similar to Magus Bride and just be somewhat of a occasionally serious, occasionally comfy, occasionally low stakes show about these two characters learning to appreciate each other and appreciate the world around them. So I see potential in this, but we'll see what happens. And that's it. Those are the shows that have caught my eye from this season. If you have any thoughts on the shows I talked about, or any shows that I inevitably did not talk about because I just missed them, because I always seem to do that, please leave that in the comments section down below. I hope all of you are looking forward to this season and that everyone enjoys the upcoming winter holidays, whether you celebrate them or not. And I hope everyone also has a very happy new year. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you next time.